Have you ever wondered why trusting God is the method by which we are saved? I mean, it seems like there's a million different things that God could have chosen as the mechanism for salvation, right? Could have been some type of special sacrifice. It could have been some set of works that we could accomplish. It could even just be something as simple as relying on Him to take care of us, right? But it's not. It's very, very specific. It is trusting God, and it is not only trusting Him, but trusting Him about a very specific thing. So to get the answer to this, we have to look at the broader narrative of how God works. So one of the things that you'll notice in Scripture is that God is always restoring. He is always rectifying anything that is twisted. He is turning it back to its original state. Everything that God does is a restoration. God creates the earth. Everything is perfect and good. Mankind sins. God puts a curse on the ground, a curse on the woman, and a curse on the snake. And then in Genesis, right after the flood, we see the beginning of this reversal process. So Noah makes a sacrifice after the flood, and it says that God says in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground." Now what's interesting is that there's another scripture whenever Noah is born, and Noah's father says, "In this one, we will find rest from our toiling." Now, if you remember, the curse of toiling was a curse on the ground. It wasn't actually a curse on Adam. And when God destroyed the earth, it acted as a form of baptism where God began the restorative process of correcting everything that was destroyed by mankind's sin. We see the same narrative played out with Jesus and Adam. It says that sin and death entered the world through one man's disobedience, Adam, and sin and death was conquered through one man, Jesus. Now that's just two big ones, but I mean, you could literally go throughout the whole of Scripture and you can watch the Lord going through this restoration process from the beginning all the way to where we are now. And so the question is, what does that have to do with trust? This is where things get interesting. So most people would say that the first sin was Eve eating the apple, but that's actually wrong. That was not actually the first sin. Otherwise, presumably, we would need to either eat from the tree of life or throw up the apple in order to reverse the process. But no, actually, the first sin was distrusting God. Now, you might look at this and say, well, wait a minute, how was that the first sin? You see, it was Eve's distrusting God that actually led her to eat from the apple. You see, it was distrust in God that opened the door for sin to then enter in through her heart and into her actions. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. If she hadn't actually done anything yet, how is that a sin? Well, you just looked at Jesus in the New Testament when he's talking to the Pharisees and they ask him about adultery. And he says, I tell you that if you look at a woman with lust in your heart or with lustful intent, you have already committed adultery with her in your heart. So you see, sin originates in the heart. And if you can commit adultery in your heart, then that means that you can sin from your heart even before you've actually taken the action and birthed the sin into the natural realm. And so what does this have to do with trust? Well, Eve's first sin was distrusting God, which led to disobedience. Trusting in Jesus is the reversal of that first sin. But here's the interesting part. Trusting in Jesus not only secures our salvation, it also inoculates us to sin. You see, all sin originates from distrusting God. Adultery originates from not trusting that God can supply the thing that you need in your soul, whether it's intimacy or whether it's the physical needs of the body, whatever that is. It all originates in not trusting that God can supply what you need. Stealing, not trusting that God can supply what you need. You can go down the list. Any sin that a human being commits originates in not trusting that God is going to or is capable of supplying the thing that we need. And so all sin originates in distrust. And in the same way, trusting in Jesus is the thing that inoculates us to sin. Now, does that mean that we will never sin again if we trusted Jesus? No, of course not, because our trust has not yet been perfected. And that is the journey of the Christian life. The whole entire everything, all of what the Christian life is the process of perfecting our trust in Jesus. That's why our faith is tested. You see, God doesn't need to test our faith to figure out whether or not we're faithful or whether or not we trust Him. God allows our faith to be tested so that we know that there are still areas that need to be resolved. There are still areas in our heart that we don't trust Him, and we need to then work through that relationally. When we fail in sin, the most important thing in that process is not the confession of the sin so that it can be healed. It is actually the thing you do after the confession, which is working with the Lord to understand what was the thing, what is the area in me that I didn't trust you? What was the need that I had that I didn't believe that you would supply? And how do we work together? Where can you meet me in that place to build my trust to where it's strong enough to resist that temptation? You see, if you trusted God fully, you would truly never sin because you'd have no reason to. It's just like if you were 100% certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that whatever the need is that you had in your relationship was going to be satisfied, you would have no need to step out and commit adultery, right? Because you are 100% certain, you trust 100% that your needs are going to be satisfied. And so trust is not only the thing that leads to our salvation, but it is also the thing that inoculates us against sin in this life. So bringing this all the way back to the beginning, if you are finding yourself in a perpetual cycle of sin, what I want to encourage you to do is, when you do that, 1, confess your sin to the Lord, and 2, I then want you to ask Him to show you, where is it? What is it in your soul? What need is it that you were trying to meet that led you to sin? And ask Him to reveal to you where in your soul is the trust weak, and then ask Him to help you by filling you with more trust in that area. See, the most interesting thing about all of this is if you look at the pattern in Adam and Eve's story, Adam and Eve first distrusted God, they then disobeyed God, and then they fled from God and tried to cover their sin. Our restoration process comes by trusting God, then obeying God. And when we stumble, because we inevitably will, instead of running and hiding our sin like Adam and Eve did, we are called to come to Him and confess the sin so that He can heal us and help us develop the missing trust. And that is why it is by trust alone that we are saved.